We're going to spend the rest of the talk talking mostly about nutrition and other lifestyle things besides exercise. So that's why I kind of wanted to get that out of the way right up front. I'm going to talk about what an optimal diet for bone health is, specifically focused on protein and mineral dense foods. Then I'm going to talk about the importance of broad nutrition supplementation rather than just focusing on calcium and vitamin D, why the bones actually need broader nutritional support for most people who are having problems with bone density. We'll talk a little bit about testing and how to test your nutritional health and then adapt your lifestyle based on that information to make progressive improvement in bone health. And we'll talk a little bit about why going outside is good for the bones. So to focus on diet to start, it's really important that you have good digestion and absorption. And I think this is something that some people take for granted and don't realize is an issue. Optimal absorption for the bones means that you're absorbing all of the nutrients that you're eating, and that relies on proper stomach acid. So if you've heard my webinars before, I have one in particular called Overcoming a Sensitive Stomach, which is all about stomach health and acid reflux and heartburn. But it stresses the importance of those digestive secretions. I also have another talk called Smooth Moves, which is all about bowel regularity and how that relies on optimal stomach secretions. So you can find those on my website, humannaturellc.com. Click on the news tab and you'll just see dozens of programs there, including those two I just mentioned. Those do a more deeper dive into things that you can do that promote optimal absorption. Very briefly, I would say that betaine hydrochloride is a supplement made from beets, is really good at helping people with improving their absorption. Most people, as we age, our stomach acid levels start to dwindle at the age of 30. And this is why, in part, most people need to eat a lot more protein and a lot more minerals as they're aging, because we're just not making the same secretions to help with absorbing these things. So betaine hydrochloride is a supplement that I really like. But there's other options too, like like an herbal bitters compound taken with meals. And these are things that need to be used consistently if you want to optimize digestion. And you can tell on an individual level if you get your blood work done and you work with someone like myself to see if you need something like this. The second key component to eating and thinking about your bone health is getting adequate protein. Next would be adequate minerals, different vitamins that are important for bone health, keeping sugar very low or non-existent, and avoiding the foods that you're sensitive to. And this is especially true for gluten. And I'm going to go into these points more. So protein is really important for making the bone and maintaining what's called the protein matrix in the bone. So 90% of that is collagen, and this is innate collagen that's made in our bodies by our bone cells in response to physical activity. So if you are moving and exercising and lifting heavy things, your body's going to produce more collagen and lay more collagen down and build up the bone. Vitamin C is a very important precursor for making collagen. So vitamin C is found in lemons, lemon juice, plenty of fresh, healthy vegetables. For some people, especially people that are active and doing a lot of physical training, it may be helpful to supplement a little bit with vitamin C also to support collagen synthesis. You can also take a collagen powder. Most people are familiar with that these days. It's just a plain, tasteless white powder that you can mix into tea or into different foods. And there are studies showing that taking collagen daily does help improve bone density. So that's a complementary thing that you can just add to your diet to help. Also increases your overall protein intake, which is good. I recommend about 12 or 15 grams of collagen daily only. I wouldn't take more than that on a consistent long-term basis. Not everybody tolerates collagen. Some people are sensitive to collagen and they know it. But those people could focus more on eating good quality proteins and taking in vitamin C. To give you an idea of the amount of protein that a person ideally would be eating for bone health, I would start with a minimum of probably 80 or 90 grams daily and shoot for that to have optimal protein for really good bone mass throughout the entire life. That would be an amount for women. Men would be a little bit higher than that, probably at least 90 to 100 grams daily, and more if someone's doing more physical exercise. So to give you an example of what that protein would look like, here's a chart that has just the average grams per serving. So like a deck of cards the size of your palm would have about 24, 25 grams of protein. If you're talking about beef or fish or chicken, they're all roughly that, although you can see in the chart that fish and chicken are a little less dense in protein than beef or lamb or pork, for example. So a person would have to have 3 to 4 servings of those 25-gram or 3-ounce servings a day to get that bare minimum. You can see there's other proteins. I probably wouldn't rely on almonds. Lentils are good. Almonds are high in oxalates, which we'll talk about in a minute, and so that counteracts the amount of calcium you can absorb from it. And you'll see as you get down towards the more plant-based foods that there's really not that much protein there. So besides protein, you want to think about mineral-rich foods. The good thing about eating a high or adequate amount of protein is that the protein foods have a lot of minerals in them too. And I get to talking about the specific minerals you need for bone health, you'll see that. Vegetables are also a great source of minerals, as well as low sugar fruits. So by low sugar fruits, I mean berries would be an example, probably avoiding tropical fruits, which are higher in sugar. And the reason for that is that as we eat higher sugar foods, they require more nutrients. And so our net nutrient gain for the bones goes down. So especially living in a colder climate, we're going to be more susceptible to that. Different studies have shown that the type of climate you're in affects your nutrient needs when you're eating high carbohydrate foods. So for a climate like Wisconsin, focusing on lower sugar foods is going to be better, especially in the cooler months of the year, to get better nutrient net gain to support bone health. Then, I'm sorry to say, there are some foods that leach collagen and also leach the minerals that we need to build the bones. And those foods are sugar. So I just mean like candy, desserts, even like someone eating a lot of fruit, caffeine, like coffee, soda. Soda and pop, specifically cola itself, is very high in phosphoric acid, which tends to leach out the nutrients needed for bones. If you have food sensitivities and you continue to eat the foods you're sensitive to, especially with celiac disease, which is the disease where someone is allergic to gluten, we know that that leads to the leaching and breakdown of bones and their density. Foods high in phytic acid also are going to work against your bone health, as are those in oxalic acid. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are. This was a headline from 2005 where scientists were reporting that they were seeing a very clear correlation in studies between those with a gluten intolerance or celiac disease and those with osteoporosis. In fact, what they found was that maybe 3 to 4% of osteoporosis cases are caused by someone continuing to eat gluten or having celiac disease that's untreated. What they found in working with children and adolescents who lost a lot of bone density and had celiac disease was that if they put them on a gluten-free diet, it completely reversed the problems with bone density. So obviously kids and adolescents are different. They usually recover more easily than older adults, but I do think that this is a promising message about how when you avoid a food that you're sensitive to, it improves your overall absorption of nutrients. It stops the stress on the body that leads to the leaching of nutrients that the bones need. And that can happen even in adults, even though it may not be as pronounced as in younger people. So I mentioned that foods high in phytates or phytic acid can also be a problem for bone health. Phytic acid is very high in grains. So uh, corn, rice, wheat, quinoa, millet, all these different grains, different beans like black beans, lentils, nuts, any kind of nut, pumpkin seeds, etc., sunflower seeds, they all naturally have phytic acid in them. And so if you're eating a plant-based diet that's very heavy in these, you can run into problems with poor levels of mineral absorption. There are some things that you can do to prepare these foods more properly so that if someone is relying on them in the diet, you can get. And if you soak the foods and then rinse them before cooking them, that helps a lot in breaking down the phytic acid and in actually getting a net calcium absorption from the foods. So, for example, if I was going to make rice, I would soak it all day on the countertop, 6 to 8 hours, rinse it, then add my water and cook it. You can also soak in the refrigerator and you can leave it in the refrigerator all week if you need to. So, that's helpful if you're planning for a meal, but it doesn't quite work out. Sometimes soaking in the refrigerator is more convenient for people to make sure that things get properly prepared if they're worried about teeth or bone health. I wrote a book called The Body Tune-Up, and you can get it on my website. It's also available more broadly at local bookstore and online. And I put it up here because it's a good example of an elimination diet to eliminate the high phytic acid foods, the high oxalate foods, get on a protein dense diet, eat a lot of vegetables, get off sugar, get off the carbohydrate wheel. So check it out if you're interested in that. It sort of lays a roadmap for a healthy diet for the bones. You can also do something called food sensitivity. This kit is actually a home kit where you just prick your finger and you can get information about your food sensitivities. If you're versed in gluten sensitivity, then you know that it's kind of a spectrum. Some people, at the end of the spectrum would have celiac disease. That would be an extreme case of gluten sensitivity. And they think a lot more individuals are somewhere else on the spectrum where they're not as sensitive as someone with celiac, but they're still very sensitive and it's causing issues with absorption. So this is an example of a test that could give you information to know if you're sensitive to things that you're eating regularly. Or you could do the elimination diet in the body tune-up. So there's trade-offs to doing the different approaches, but just wanted to give you an example of how you can tease some of that information out for yourself. So when you're thinking about optimizing a diet for bone health, it can be helpful to use some different tools. If you haven't looked up a calcium calculator online, that can be really helpful. A lot of people would prefer to get their mineral intake through food alone rather than taking a supplement, and there's some valid reasons to do that. And so this is an example. Bone Health and Osteoporosis.org has this calculator. There's a few other calculators available online with nonprofits dedicated to bone health. And basically, you type in what you eat throughout the day in the high calcium foods, and then you can see, if my target, let's say, for example, was 1,200 milligrams, am I eating enough green vegetables and sardines and dairy products to get to my target or not? Do I need to change something? So that can be a really helpful tool to see if you're meeting your calcium needs um, with food intake alone. These are some examples. Seaweed is another one, besides the ones I just mentioned. Legumes can be higher in the minerals needed for bones. Of course, they're a high phytate food, so they need to be soaked and rinsed first. And green vegetables can also be very helpful, but you want to avoid the high oxalate ones. And I have those listed here. So spinach is very high in oxalic acid, beet greens, chard. So what that means is that those foods are going to inhibit your calcium absorption. So you don't want to be eating a spinach salad every day, for example, thinking you're actually getting calcium from it, because it's actually because of the high oxalate level would counteract that benefit. The other thing to know is that high fiber foods like a psyllium husk or Metamucil, or a fiber blend, fiber powder that you might be taking, maybe adding to a smoothie. Research has shown that when people pair high fiber with calcium, the fiber decreases the calcium absorption. So if you are someone who's taking a high fiber food for bowel health or something like that, you're going to want to separate that. Maybe take it by itself or with other foods that aren't with the high calcium foods that you're trying to absorb to count towards getting more calcium for yourself. Other high oxalate foods besides spinach would be almond milk, soy milk. So these aren't the best source of calcium to rely on, because the oxalates in them will work against your ability to actually get minerals from them. And I've listed a few of the other high oxalate foods here.